Great. For hundreds of years, Western society has operated on one dogmatic belief that we as individual economic actors are rational in our behavior, that we're motivated to make money and we're averse to losing money. And we make choices based on that model. It makes sense then that if I wanted to stop people from speeding, I would put up a speeding sign. I might put a sign next to it that says, fine, $100 if you speed too much. And maybe to help them from speeding, put something like this, which is a digital meter that says you're going too fast or too slow. Now, this all makes sense if we were rational actors. But funny enough that if I give people, instead of their speed and instead of their fine, a smiley face if they're respecting the speed limit and a frowny face if they're not, people are 60% more likely to obey the speed limit. It goes even further. Doctors are 34% more likely to recommend a surgery for cancer if they're presented with the survival rate instead of the death rate. But they're the same number. Even Google experienced this because what they wanted to do is increase water uptake and reduce soda intake by their staff. And what they realized is just by moving water to eye level, they were increasing consumption by 47%. So, are we really irrational? Maybe. In the last 50 years, we've done more progress than in the last 500 to understand how the mind works. And what we're beginning to realize is that we're not necessarily irrational, we're predictably irrational. And the reason for that is it turns out that our brain doesn't like to think. It takes a lot of resources and it's a lot of work. And as much as possible, if we can offload thinking to an automated system, we will do that. We like to be guided to our choices. Much like a pilot who lands at night and has these brilliant lights on the runway. We're an automatic pilot if we can be. In fact, what we like to do is anchor our choices, and if we have an anchor to base our choice on and where we're supposed to go next, we will just intuitively follow it and never question it. Let me give you an example of what this means. Which circle is larger and which one is smaller? The reality is there's no question that the circle next to the small circles looks very large, but the circle next to the large circle looks very small. And that's because that's really how our mind works. We don't know small or large unless we can compare it in a relative quantity. This little thing actually has profound implications for how we negotiate and how we choose products. Turns out they're the same size circle. So this is your brain. And we've recently developed a new understanding for how your brain works. It's called dual process theory. Let me explain. First, we have system one side of our brain. We can call this our intuition. This part of our brain is blazingly fast. It gives results like that. How does it give results? Well, it relies on past history and rules of thumb. It's kind of like our pre-programming, our operating system. We don't think about it, but it's there all the time, and as much as possible will make decisions for us. And it is fantastic at making decisions for situations we're familiar with. And we know it, we feel it, it is our gut feeling. It is the Homer Simpson part of our brain. System 2 is the other side of the brain. It's reasoning. It's slow, it's focused, it's self-aware. We engage it actively because we want to solve a complex problem that's not familiar to us. That is the Mr. Spock. Long rest in peace. What we want to think is as rational actors, we are in control of our brain and our actions and our decisions and our choices. But there's a parable about the elephant rider and the elephant. The elephant rider sits atop the elephant and likes to think that wherever the elephant goes was his choice. The reality is, if the elephant wants to go somewhere, it doesn't matter what the rider wanted, the elephant goes. And that's really how our brain works. Hence, behavioral economics, the study of how we actually behave and why, and in particular, how we make decisions. Behavioral economics is a multidisciplinary field. It combines economics, traditional theories of the marketplace, along with psychology, which is now informed by new tools that are everything from functional resonant imaging, scientific research, to really inform how we behave. So let me give you an example of this in action. Let's say we're in the market to buy a TV. and we're looking at two televisions, and they're very similar. We'll call them A and B. Now, A maybe has a slight advantage over B. Maybe it's got a better refresh rate. Now, if I were making a choice just between A and B, I would say to myself, okay, A is slightly better. I'm going to take A, and I'm going to rule out B. However, what happens if I add a third choice into the mix? We still have our A, and we still have our B. But let's say this one is B minus. It's just like B, but maybe it has a scratch on it, or it's a little bit dented. How will I then approach this decision? Well, this is where the automatic pilot of our brain takes over. Instead of making the same choice in the same way, in the same evaluation as I made before, what I will do now is right away rule out option A, because it is the dissimilar option. It requires a lot of thinking to compare that against the other two. Instead, I'm going to make a decision between B and B minus. And given the choice between B and B minus, I can see clearly B minus has a scratch on it, hence I'm going to take B. This has been proven over and over and over in experimentation and lab results, and really has consequence for maybe how we present our products on websites, how we present carousels, how we may even want to present pricing tables. It also has consequences for how lucky we are when we go to the bar. Because say we want to pick up that attractive guy or gal. We can go on our own merits, but as we saw from the A and B results, if there's a really hunky guy or gorgeous girl next to us, maybe we don't stand as good a chance. But if we come to the bar with our friend who's like us, but maybe a little less good looking, our odds go up. And if conversation matters, it certainly helps if they're not as conversational as we are. So I know what you're thinking right now. The first thing you're thinking is, my goodness, how many choices have affected my life that I didn't even make? And the second thing you're thinking is, which of my friends should I invite to the bar tonight? Okay, this is the fun stuff that we see with Frank Underwood, the stuff that's kind of manipulative and exciting. And so today, what I want to do is, as an introduction to behavioral economics, is just look at the persuasive side of behavioral economics. So how should you think about behavioral economics? Well, first, for you as UX designers, you should think of BE as a tool to help your users take an action or help them overcome barriers to taking an action. And recognize that the environment in which a person makes a decision affects that decision. So when we think about behavioral economic mechanisms, we understand that we can design a better environment for our users. Let's delve right into it. Part 1. Imagine you found yourself invited to participate in a study on art appreciation. You end up in a room and you're looking at a painting. What you don't know is you've been set up. Next to you comes Joe, who you think is another participant just like yourself. After a few minutes, Joe leaves the room, and he comes back with a Coke, and he says, hey, I was thirsty, I got myself a Coke, I got one for you too. Well, you're not going to reject it, that's a very polite offer. You're going to take it and say thank you. Now, just a few seconds later, Joe says, you know what, I'm kind of raising money for this charity, I'm selling tickets for a raffle, and if I sell enough tickets, I get $100. They're only 25 cents a piece, would you like to buy one? Interesting result. So first of all, they did this experiment. In the first case, if Joe comes back and just asks for a ticket, never having brought anyone a Coke, the uptake is very low. But for anyone who received a Coke, they were 200% more likely to buy a raffle ticket. But that's not all. What's really interesting is this was done in the 60s, when a Coke was just 10 cents. But there was on average, more than a 500% return on investment, which means this one act that no one solicited, no one asked for, actually triggered a mechanism that made us feel indebted and willing to spend a lot of money, even though we never asked to. And this is a mechanism called reciprocity. Because, let's face it, the rule states we feel obliged to pay in kind what another person has given to us. This is exceptionally important in evolutionary terms, and this is probably why this mechanism exists, because the idea of reciprocity allowed us to specialize in different tasks. Instead of me having to be a hunter and gatherer, I could now focus on maybe my skill as carpentry, and someone else could focus on their skill as farming, and we were ready to exchange resources in kind for our mutual success and benefit. It's basically the theory of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Of course, in the hands of Frank Underwood, we may actually call it something different and say, give a little so you can take a lot. There is no more profound example of this than can be found in the late 60s with the Hare Krishna Society. If you're not familiar with them, they're a sect that's centuries old and come from Calcutta, India. But our story actually takes place in the 60s. In the 60s, they would walk around chanting, singing, and to be honest, looking kind of odd, and asking for donations. And the average American felt very uncomfortable with them, felt that they were, to be honest, plainly weird, and avoided them. And what they realized is they were running out of money, and they were in serious, serious trouble as an organization. Now, most organizations would actually hear the feedback from their customers and change what people don't like about them. The problem is a lot of the things that people didn't like about the Hare Krishnas and found weird were tied to religious connotations, and so they can't be changed easily. So what's a sect to do? That's a pretty serious problem. Well, they came up with a solution, and that solution was brilliant. What they did, and you might have experienced this yourself, if you ever walk past a Hare Krishna, before you know what's happening, they've handed you a flower and put it in your hand, or put it in your lapel, and under no circumstances would they take it back. They say simply, it's a gift from us to you. But if you want to make a donation, feel free. They invoked the reciprocation principle, and they invoked it brilliantly. People felt so obliged that within a short amount of time, they found themselves with oodles of cash, properties around the world, and more successful than ever. And in fact, there's a really funny story that this many years later, people still know that it'll have this effect. And what happens if they see Hare Krishnas, they'll actually go way outside of their way to avoid them because they know as soon as they get that flower in their hand, they just feel obliged to pay. The Hare Krishnas know this as well. And what's really interesting is they'll hand a flower, and of course most people don't really want the flower, so a few steps later we'll throw it out. They go and they collect all the flowers back from the garbages and redistribute them. It's okay, they're pretty smart. This similar effect is well known by waitresses as well and waiters, because they know if just before I give you the bill, if I give you a couple of mints or a chocolate, the amount of tip you give me goes up. And that was proven by a Canadian study. So it's very interesting. So the question comes, how, as UX practitioners, can we apply the mechanics of reciprocity in our products that we design? Here are a few ideas. The first is, before we ask our user to do something, let them use your app or give them something. In this case, Epicurious has a feature where you can use the microphone, but we don't ask them up front for that approval. We let them get there and do it only once they select that action. Another option. Here's one. We can give a free gift. That's great. Or we can give free resources like this in our blog or papers or other resources. I love this one. This is free help. So this one does a bra fitting. It's a bra fitting tool for women. You know what? If you just take the tool, you're going to appreciate the service. It works anyways, and you're more likely to order from them. And of course, news agencies have been struggling with paywalls for a while. HBR, Harvard Business Review, is doing something kind of brilliant. I don't know if you've experienced it. They've restructured all their properties like this, and you have a little counter, so you see how many free articles you get each month. And as you read an article, it goes by, and the user begins to feel, wow, I got 5 free articles. Maybe I should subscribe. It's valuable to me. And it's not too intrusive, and you didn't lock me out. You brought me in. Very effective. And all of this is really the same premise Gary Vaynerchuk used in his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. Are you guys familiar with that book? It's a great book, and basically what it says is Jab is the content brands give away for free, and they deepen and create a value relationship with their clients by giving the right content native to each individual social platform. By giving it away for free, they're creating a relationship with their customer. And if they give it away, jab, jab, jab 3 times, then the right hook. That's when you ask that user to take an action that will benefit your brand or your business. And it's pretty effective. There's another strange effect that happens as well with the reciprocity principle, and this one's a little bit different. What if a Boy Scout comes to your door, is raising money for his school, and he says, would you like to buy a chocolate? I've got chocolates for $8. And you're like, $8? No, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that chocolate. He goes, oh, okay, no problem, but I also have a chocolate for $2. Well, chances are you're going to get a $2 chocolate whether you wanted it or not, because this rejection then retreat mechanism invokes the same reaction as the reciprocity. We actually feel as though we were given something just because the other party that was negotiating with us backed down. There's two interesting side effects to this. The first is that the onus, the sense of responsibility, transfers from the person making the request to the person receiving the request. The second one is once you agree to this lower position, you actually feel satisfied with the result. Very interesting. This has been used in many different ways. Gary Marshall, who was the producer of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and a lot of other producers say the same story. They always had to go through censorship. And they know if they went with the original script, the wording they'd want would be taken out. So what they do is they pile in tons and tons and tons of stuff for the censor to rule out so that they get to keep what they really wanted in the first place. Don't tell my clients, but I sometimes do that in my wireframes as well. Rejection then retreat also works when we merchandise. So let's say we had two models of pool tables, a $329 model and a $3,000 model. The traditional approach says when a client comes in or when I market and advertise my product, I'm going to take them to the lowest price product and then ladder up from there. Well, one place actually tried that, and when they did that, when they started with the $329 model and worked their way up, the average table sale that week was $550. The next week, they tried a different tactic. No matter what the client was asking for, they took them right away to the $3,000 table. And from there, backed down from there. The result, the average price of the table sold was $1,000, marking a 55% increase in sales. This is really dramatic, and it should change our thinking in terms of how we push our products on our website or in our apps. It also pays for restaurants to add an expensive menu item, because if their most expensive menu item is $60, we avoid it for the lower choice. But if they add an expensive menu item that's $120, guess what? The previous expensive item is going to get ordered more. It makes me wonder that when I see car websites like this, they always do something. They show a beautiful picture, they show what the base price is, and below it, they show model as listed. But I wonder if they reverse that, would they be more effective? Here's Banana Republic, a store that I like, and I was wondering if instead of saying big and tall, what if they had a carousel up there, or a big, big, big tout, a big image, and it said, like our new blazer, $500, and then everything else would be cheaper below it. I think that might change the outcome of what people buy. So reciprocation, how do you use it? Well, in order to amplify the effects of reciprocation, it's important that you provide something exclusive and unique to the recipient so that they feel special. Make sure that they know it's from you, and also don't just give once. Try to give, and maintain that feeling of indebtedness. And remember that sometimes you can invoke this principle just by reminding someone what you've done for them before. But also we want to know something else. How do we defend against this dark art? Before accepting a free gift or a discounted service, really ask yourself how you're going to feel, and are you going to feel obliged having taken it? There are some beauty supply stores that you'll know, they stand out and they give free samples. This is a tactic. This is classic implementation of the reciprocation principle. Part 2. In the 1960s, these two researchers, Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser, published an astonishing set of data. They went around to a neighborhood and they asked people if they would do a civic service. And the civic service was to put a billboard on their lawn and ask them if they would, and it says, drive carefully. And what they did is they showed these homeowners a picture of it. And what they showed was a billboard that was so big it basically blocked out the house with terrible typography and font on it. And what do you think the natural outcome would be? Well, the natural outcome is 83% of homeowners said, no way, you're not putting that on my property. But then the next week, they did something a little bit different, and they got 76% of people to agree to put that exact same sign on their lawn. So what changed? What changed is really interesting. A week before, they had someone come by and say, could I put on your lawn a drive carefully sign that's only 3 inches? It turns out that once people agreed to the first request, they were ready to ladder up to the much larger and, to be honest, quite ridiculous request. Why is that? Well, this came to be known as the foot in the door approach in sales. And it's all about commitment and consistency. And what that says is we have a self-identity. And when we put ourselves out there and we make a promise or we take an action, we will change everything about ourselves to suit this new reality. We don't want to describe ourselves falsely, and we'll go to an irrational degree to do it. Our best evidence of what people truly feel and believe comes less from their words and more from their deeds. This is why gamblers who bet on a horse feel much better about that horse after they've laid down their bet. They've made their choice and they've declared it. It's also the source of the IKEA effect. And the IKEA effect is they measured satisfaction with people with their furniture, and what they found is the more labor you put into something, the more you appreciate it. I think kids are the same way, because a lot of people may say they love my kids, but if I ask them, great, really? They're for sale. How much will you pay? They're not ready to pay very much, it turns out. But for me, they're invaluable to me, but probably because of all the effort and pain I've put into them. This is also the principle behind cults. It's really interesting that there's all these cults, and especially doomsday cults, that people become involved in, very active in, and the end of the world is coming, I don't know, in July. July comes and goes, and the world didn't end. But what you see is the members didn't drop out of the cult. Why is that? Because they made a commitment, and they want to be consistent with that commitment. And even in the face of doubt, they're ready to behave irrationally and double down on their previous choice. In my opinion, it kind of explains this guy, but that's enough about that. So how can you take advantage of it? Well, it's really interesting. There's services like Stick, which basically let you make your goal public, write it down, and even put in some stakes against it, and even get a referee and a coach. But the whole point is if you declare your resolution, and the more effort you put into your resolution, the more likely you are to keep it. This is true for diets. This is true for bank savings. This is true for everything. And in fact, the people of Jawbone recognize this as well. And Monica Rogati, who's a data scientist, she noticed that some people were sleeping more and some people were sleeping less, so she decided to do a little experiment invoking this very principle. And what she did is they sent, I think they called her, they sent an email to 40,000 users asking them to declare their intent to go to bed earlier. And of those that responded, more than 2/3 stuck to the agreement they wrote down. They totally changed their behavior just by declaring it. This is great as well, Wishpond. It is an essay contest app, but the point behind it is if you have a contest, let's say for a brand you're working with, and people have to write an essay, what they're going to do is they recognize that they have to write good things about that product. As they write those good things about that product, the consistency principle moves in and the commitment principle, and they begin to believe what they wrote, and their brand adherence from that point is very, very high. Warby Parker does a great job of this. They let you select any 5 frames and get it to your door. What they know is even though you can send them all back, having made that choice, having received that box, you're very, very likely to return any of them. And it's true. Zappos does the exact same thing. They have a brilliant return policy, totally frictionless, and yet you see that people don't return as much as you might think because they've made that commitment to the purchase. They get the box. They don't want to return it now. So, to use commitment and consistency, make your users take a stand and leverage future offers and statements against that identity you help them form. Showcase their choices to the public so that they're accountable to everyone else. Remember that you want to get them to put in as much effort as possible, but not so much that it hurts. But the more effort they put in, they're more likely they're going to stick with their commitment. When a person has signed an order for a merchandise, even if it's for a little trial, remember that even if it seems so small and so unprofitable, it's worth it because you've already converted them to being a customer instead of a prospect. How do you defend against this dark art? Well, before you agree to any course of action, at a preliminary level, ask yourself, is this the course of action you want to take, or might you want to change your mind in the future? Be careful with your declarations. This apparently is a very, very powerful mechanism and can have effect years into the future. Part 3. Imagine that you and your friends are going out for an evening out. And you go to a place and there's 2 nightclubs across the street from each other. One nightclub has a line like this and the other nightclub has no line. Which one do you go to? Well, since you guys are out for a good time, it's very likely you're going to get in this line. And as we all know, nightclubs have been stacking their lines for years, knowing that people operate like this. Why? Because we feel reassured and safer making a decision if we know what others have chosen. And it actually makes a lot of sense because generally speaking, if we listen to the public and we listen to the majority, it's probably a good choice more times than not. Interestingly enough, they observed this effect in France in the 1800s, and they started a process in theaters and at the opera where people were called claques. And you could pay for claques to sit there, and they had a different pay rate if you wanted an encore, if you wanted a clap, if you wanted an ovation. And basically what I'm saying is that became the laugh track of today, where it's been positively measured that if I put in a laugh track of canned laughter into a sitcom, our audience laugh and entertainment and humor value goes up. Ironically, it works even better for those really, really bad jokes. And I haven't run into anyone who likes canned laughter, but Hollywood knows that this trick works and they continue to use it. It's the exact same reason why bartenders or buskers will salt their tip jar, because you will see that other people have been tipping, and that's the social proof you need to know that that's a good activity and you should participate in it also. Basically, social proof is what a lot of people would refer to as peer pressure or herd behavior. But I would say it's more likely to see an action as appropriate when others are doing it. And as a rule, we will make fewer mistakes by acting in according with social evidence than contrary to it. And that's really embedded deep within us. Let me give you an example of just how powerful social proof is. Kids with a very deep phobia of dogs, even the cutest dog will look like this to them. Really, really ferocious. But Albert Bandura did a really interesting study with kids with the worst phobia of dogs you could imagine. And what he did is he showed them a video. He showed them of kids very much like himself, playing with dogs, enjoying themselves, and having fun. The outcome was incredible. 67% of those kids that previously couldn't even get near a dog was not only ready to get near a dog, they were ready to be locked in a small pen with a dog and play with them. What they noticed is, A, if there is social proof, I will follow it. B, if I can recognize myself in that character, it's more likely to influence me. And 3, the more kids you showed me behaving this way, the more likely I am to adopt the behavior. For that very reason is why this sign is much less effective than this sign. So how can we take advantage of this very powerful mechanism called social proof? Well, the first, shares and trending. Take a look here. Mashable is showing us how many shares this article had. I like what they did because they also have this little graph so you can see how it's trending. Well, that's social proof, and we're more likely to open an article that's trending in this way. No one does this better than Amazon. And this is just a little snippet at the end of one of their pages. And look at all of this. First, they have what other items do customers buy after viewing this item. They include social review and rating. Then they have the product rating. Then more than that, they have customers who bought this item also bought, and again, they have more ratings. And that's just on one little snippet. But we know, and if you've been on Amazon, this is really addictive, and we end up surfing the choices of others, and we browse a whole lot of products. Another example of social proof is customer testimonials. You see these on home pages. You see these under forms because they're really, really effective. And again, they're really effective if we recognize ourselves. So if we're, let's say, a CTO, and those testimonials are from other CTOs, they're more likely to influence us. Of course, testimonials have become a little bit easier because today we can embed social media. So what we can do is we can track our social media, we can find the tweets that we like, and we can embed them. We can go one step further in case we want more information instead of less. We can actually have customer case studies where customers can give much deeper testimonials on how this product has affected them. Integrating this will give your customers a lot of confidence. There's another great service called Review. It's basically Ask a Customer. Honda implemented in the UK to brilliant results, and basically what it does is they connected people who were prospective buyers using this platform can ask existing owners about their experience and ask them any questions they want. This is really, really effective stuff. Something else I like on their site is this, social informatics. They're just more engaging, but they have the same effect. Another principle you can go with as well is the number of users you have. And no one does it better than McDonald's. And I have to say I've aged myself because I kind of remember when that number was in millions, and now it's billions and billions. Another example of number of users, and a great one that I really like, is on Basecamp. Look at this right up there. Just last week, 5,622 companies signed up for Basecamp. Or the other example, last year alone, Basecamp helped over 285,000 companies finish more than 2 million projects. That's really effective social proof and confidence building. So how can we take advantage of social proof? Well, we can leverage experts. We can leverage celebrities because their endorsement and our trust of them will extend to the brand they're talking about. We can leverage users and approval from current and past users, and we can use the wisdom of crowds and peers. What's really important to note is that you can use multiple sources to demonstrate social proof and amplify the brand you're working on. Note that customers who don't know much about your product or haven't worked with you before, they have a lot of doubt. So social proof can really give them the confidence to go with you as opposed to with a competitor. How do you defend against social proof? Well, don't follow herd mentality. Really ask yourself, is this right for me, or am I doing this just because everyone else is? Which kind of sounds like an after-school special, but it's a good point. Part 4. There was an interesting study they did on Canadians. It turned out that 2.5 times as many Canadians vote for the prettier candidate. Now, not only do they vote for the prettier candidate, 73% of those people deny ever doing it vehemently. In fact, out of the entire voting population, only 14% would even acknowledge that this might play a role in their decision-making. This is called liking. But in the case of Jean Chrétien, maybe there's an exception to every rule. Okay. We're more likely to be influenced by people we'll like. But likability comes in many different forms. But why is that? Why are we influenced by this likability? Well, it says we're going to say yes to a person we feel a connection with. We feel we have something in common with because we feel that they have our best interest in mind or share a similar perspective with us. This has been exploited for a long time. Tupperware parties of the 50s, right? You'd get together at a friend's house, have Tupperware parties. I've never been to one. I don't know what that really means. But I know that it breaks down the barriers. You're not talking to a salesperson. You're having fun with your friends. And that reduction of your defense mechanisms means you're much more likely to buy, and the conversion rates were really, really high. There's this guy. This is a man who lived in Detroit, and his name is Joe Girard. You may not know him, but he's in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's greatest salesman. In fact, he made so much money in the car industry, you'd think he was a big executive, but he wasn't. He was just a car salesman. When asked, well, what is his secret? Because on average, he would sell 5 new cars and 5 new trucks every single day of his life. He said, well, I just do 2 things. 1, I give a fair price, and 2, I give someone they like to buy from. That's it. How can we take advantage of it? Well, first, we can use celebrity endorsement because we can use the likability of celebrities and extend it to our products. Sobeys is a great example of that, where they've partnered up with Jamie Oliver, who not only is very likable, but he's known for seeking good family nutrition and health benefits and good tasty food. So we begin to now reflect on the Sobeys brand that if he made that choice, we can really fulfill our promise through that as well. GoPro. If you go to their landing page, they did this great thing with NHL stars, and here we have Sidney Crosby, skating around and doing some skills. That's a great endorsement. There's a great product, and there's a good lifestyle fit there. The other thing you can do is you can make your company or services personable. Apple does this all the time, and they always show Johnny Ive standing behind their products. Here, this is Shoe Dazzle with their chief designer, Rachel Zoe. And of course, our friends who used to be at Tehan and Lex, they did this really well, showing off all the faces and people in their company. And, if you go there, you see these people are really likable and approachable and gives a level of brand authenticity, so you're ready to work with them. Another important quality that you can do is make sure that your clients see themselves in your products. It's really important that your user identifies. So here, there's no question. You are a certain kind of hipster if you're buying from this company, right? Same is true for Zara. You're a certain type of client if you go there, but they do something else that's really, really important that a lot of people miss. They have social links right at the bottom. They know that if I'm your friend and I recommend a product to you, that carries a lot of influence and weight. So just by carrying social links like Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest, I know that I can amplify through the social graph. Fab does this really well as well. And there's even new services that recognize that that's so profound an effect, like Stuck. Is it called Stuck? That basically says, I can't make a choice, so let me throw it out to my friends and my audience and get their opinion. Which handbag should I get, pink or blue? And they're going to give us feedback. But remember, another aspect of likability really comes down to cosmetics. to visuals and how we perceive things. And just like we liked politicians who were prettier, so too do we like brands that look better, look more finished, whose brochures look sharp. So honestly, if your website looks like this, you might be out of luck. So that's liking. What makes up liking and how do we take advantage of it? Like I said, physical attractiveness is very important. Similarity. Behave like a friend, not a brand. Show them that you can relate to and understand them. Compliments go a really, really long way. And when's the last time an app complimented you? Take advantage of that. Contact and cooperation. Fight for the same causes as your customers. Nothing builds rapport and closeness like good old-fashioned teamwork. And it's true that anywhere you've gone, any conference, if we were to start milling, we're going to likely end up gravitating towards groups that have some similarity. Oh, you're from Brampton, I'm from Brampton. We're going to end up talking together because we found that commonality. And conditioning and association. Associate your brands with the same values that you want to communicate and you want to possess. How do we defend against this? Well, when you feel tempted to sign up for a product or service, ask yourself, have you fall under the spell of a particularly likable salesperson or website? Is the salesperson similar to you, familiar to you, or extremely complimentary, and that's influencing your decision? If so, stop it right there and tell them, you know what, I'm not going to buy this because my gut is telling me not to. Just saying that even to yourself is surprisingly effective. Part 5. How am I for time? Good? Most people have heard of the famous Milgram experiments. This is where people were called, I'm going to speak a little bit faster because I realize I'm running out of time. This is where people were called into a laboratory setting, and though the conditions were fake, they didn't know it, and they were asked to turn up, basically to electrocute someone at the other end if they got the answer wrong. And they were asked to go up and go up and go up in voltage. What happened is, even though that they were excruciating suffering to see what they were doing to someone else, they still did it. And what came out of the Milgram experiments was that the reason they listened was the guy asking them to do it had a lab coat. And just by having a lab coat, he carried with him authority that they wanted to listen to. And it turns out that authority is very powerful on us. We feel a sense of duty or obligation to people in positions of authority. And even little trigger like job titles, uniforms, accessories like cars or badges can get us to follow what they're doing. But this has application in other spheres as well. Authority in the hosting industry. So if you've ever gone to a dinner party at a nice restaurant, there's 15 of you, and you order today's special. Waitress kind of looks around, sees that the manager isn't there, and goes in and says, you know what, to be honest, I wouldn't order that. It's not very good tonight. But may I recommend options B or C? They're both very good tonight. Oh, instantly you trust this person. They have your best interest in mind, and they have authority. Now, it might seem counterintuitive that they told you not to buy something, but the reality is, now that you trust them, they can come back later in the meal and say, would you like this wine? May I recommend this dessert? And they end up padding the bill much more than before. They do this because they know the more you spend, the bigger the tip. How can you take advantage of this? Expert creation. If you have a scientific product or experts on your team or within your company, feature content created by them. Curation of experts. You know, it's one thing to buy French cookbooks. It's another one to buy one from Jacques Pepin, the best French cook there is. Curation by experts and by influencers. And there's no better example of this than Oprah's book club. And also, if your company is really, a thought leader, sponsor events. Wrangle.io, one of the sponsors here today, they do this very well. You can also demonstrate thought leadership, which will give you a lot of authority, just by publishing white papers and giving it to your audience. You can also connect with a professional. Look what the Ensure brand does. The Ensure promises balanced nutrition for those in medical need. And what they do is right on their website, they say, ask a nutritionist. You can book an appointment right now and get an instant feedback. That perception that, hey, there's a third-party professional I can talk to, and they advocate for this product and going to help me in general, gives them a lot of authority. Of course, you can always talk with an expert, but we know one company is the only company on earth that lets you talk to a genius anytime you want. And of course, show your creds. I've never had a Wagamuffin, but I got to tell you, they keep winning all of these awards. Put it up on your website. Make it prominent. That lends a lot of authority. It also helps that this guy, Richard Branson, is a big fan of theirs and has done his own blog post on it, and they can amplify it on social media. Show that shit off. And artisanal expertise. If you have artisanal expertise, really show that off. It really shows that you have authority in the field or in the product category that you're in. Leverage trust seals and other seals like that. People who have doubts, whatever authenticity that seal has gets transferred to your product. So authority. Here you can use both your own authority and the authority of others and influencers. And if you're marketing a product or service, highlight well-known and respected customers. Use comments and industry experts and talk about impressive research or statistics. Got to go quickly. How do you protect against this? Has the person you're negotiating with triggered your respect for authority? Are you making a decision just because they're wearing a particular lab coat? Really think about this and augment your decision making. Oh, guys, we're short on time. Okay, part 5, scarcity. There was this experiment that they did that said, if I gave people 10 cookies and another group of people, I gave 10 cookies, but I took 8 away and they were only left with 2 cookies. We were asked each group to rate their cookies. The people who were left with 2 cookies said theirs were better and tastier. Why? Because there's always been this principle that things that are scarce become more valuable and better. We value those things that have recently become less available to us. How do you take advantage of it? Limited number tactics. Look at this on bookings.com. The first thing they do is they say, we only have 2 rooms left. But then they put on the pressure because then they say, but there's another person looking at this resort. We see this on eBay all the time. They're really good at it. It says there's only like 14 seconds left to make your choice, but look, there are 19 other bids. Hurry, hurry, hurry. I feel that way right now. Of course, we can do limited time tactics, right? Today's deals. But Amazon does something else. They do a lot of seasonal specials. So St. Patrick's Day, Black Friday, you can see it right there. I think that Tiger Direct does a great job of it because not only do they do the same thing, they put that big today's deal ends in. So you feel really the pressure of the clock, just like I do right now. Out of stock is an opportunity because if it's out of stock, it's social proof that that's a really popular thing. So what this company does is they also say, sign up so you can get more information when we get this product. That is a very powerful call to action. Have limited editions of your product. You know which company does this really, really well? Starbucks. Who doesn't look forward to their pumpkin spice latte? That seasonality is really important. And of course, clearance sales, because people know this merchandise isn't coming back, it's going. That's a great pressure motive. And another opportunity is one we see from Kickstarter. Hey, while something is on Kickstarter and going really hot, I can sign up now and I can get more for my money. That is a sales opportunity. Scarcity. How do we use it? Basically, if you're selling a product, limit the availability of stock. Set a closing date for the offer or create special editions of the product. How to defend? Before you fall for a sales pitch, really ask yourself, am I doing this because I feel pressured or am I doing this because this is what I want? Cautionary note. Be careful how you use these principles. You can use them to mislead people, but that's not a good thing to do. You don't want to exert undue influence. A good reputation takes a long time to build, but you can lose it in a moment. And ultimately, I'm telling you all of this, but don't be evil. Be great UX people. And I know that's what you are because every single day you go out there and you go to work and you take crappy products and you translate them into good experiences. You make the products more usable, you reduce friction of use, and you make them friendlier and more engaging. But there is a bias in our industry, and that bias is towards the elements of cognitive psychology. Certainly, we don't want to lose it. We want to have clear navigation. We want to have a sense of hierarchy. We want to employ good color theory. But more than that, there is a failing there. And the failing, and you see this all the time, for example, in wearables, you can have a great UI that's really functional, but the problem is it hasn't affected behavior change. And that's where if you apply the elements of behavioral economics, you will be more effective in your job and help achieve more successful outcomes for your clients and your business. So the secret sauce number 7 is really you. I encourage you to implement BE and to share your experiments, the successes and the failures with your community so everyone can learn from you. So we focused on just 6 elements of, these are called Cialdini's 6 principles of influence, but there are actually hundreds more. And I really recommend you pick up this book on influence that covers in much more detail the 6 principles I talked about today. Predictably Irrational is just brilliant, full of anecdotes and a lot of research by Dan Ariely. Thinking Fast and Slow is really what set off this behavioral economics movement. Daniel Kahneman won in 2002 the Nobel Prize for economics. And Designing for Behavior Change is fantastic, and it'll show you how to lay in BE aspects into your workflow and ultimately drive a better understanding of what motivates people. Guys, thank you very much.